Welcome to What's Your Next Move, the podcast for peak performers who are making things happen but are running into roadblocks that prevent them from getting what they want. Whether you work for someone else, you're an entrepreneur, thinking about starting your own business, or at a point in your life where you just can't make the move from where you are to where you want to go, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about answering one question: what's your next move? And helping you harness your power so your next move is the one that changes your life. I'm your host and resident provocateur, Arlene Battisil, and I want to know, what's your next move? Hi there, I'm Arlene Battisil, your host and resident provocateur, and I am bringing to you today a provocative topic. And my guest is Dr. Jane Guyn, who has written an Amazon #1 bestseller called Too Busy to Get Busy. And Dr. Jane, as she is referred to, is what we call a sexologist. And I know that this is something that we don't normally touch on the show here, but it really is the issues that sexologists deal with are issues that many, many people are dealing with today and are interfering with their lives. And for entrepreneurs, it's interfering with their businesses, because if things are not right in your intimate relationship, things are not going to be right anywhere else in your life unless you are a master of compartmentalization. And, you know, God bless you if you are, but good luck when you actually tap into those emotions. And so I just want to give you a little rundown on, being too busy to get busy. And it goes like this. Are you tired of being roommates with your lover, trying to decide if you should stay or if you should go? And of course, too busy to get busy, and no time, no energy. You can't talk about it, just don't want to do it. Your body won't work right. You don't have a partner. And the list goes on and on and on of what goes on around all of us as human beings and as adults and our sex lives. So Dr. Jane, thank you so very much for being with me today. I really, really appreciate it. This is going to be a great conversation.
It's absolutely my pleasure, Arlene. Thank you so much for having me.
Beautiful. So let's just get into the nitty gritty here. Talk to me just very briefly about what you're doing right now and where you're at in your life.
You bet. So right now, I've been married. I'm a married woman, been married for absolutely decades, and I'm in the midst of the same life that our listeners are in the midst of. I'm out here. I actually live in a rural area in Oregon. And my husband and I are co-creating a passionate life over and over again, and in our daily connection with each other, and going through all the same things that everybody else does, being arguably being busy, but still finding a way to drop in together with a real connection as human beings and as passionate adults, that we are able to find, just like so many times, to be able to find that space in ourselves, really, and then with each other. So that is in my personal life what I'm doing, and also just like keeping myself open to all that is. In fact, right now we are scheduled to go to a fantastic Embracing the Darkness workshop in Oakland in a few weeks, where we're going to expand into understanding our shadow sides and, learning about our archetypal natures as human beings and understanding ourselves in these other areas. So I'm always growing as a sexual person, and so is my husband. We're growing independently and together, and so that's my personal life. In my business life, I'm guiding people toward the ability to really understand who we authentically are as individuals and in partnership, and to find the voice for what that actually looks like when it is authentically expressed.
Right. And just one question about your husband. Does he work in the same field as you? Is that his background by training?
No, he's a corporate type. No, he is not. In fact, he's amazing and funny because I'll enroll him in things, kind of first I'll enroll him, one-on-one, like, well, hey, you know what? I got this information from a group of people who are doing this amazing workshop, and it allows you to learn about your shadow side, and it's really interesting. It's called Embracing the Darkness. He's like, that's, well, I don't think I want to do that. I'm like, cool, no problem. I think I'm going to go. But, you're certainly welcome to join me. And he's like, you're going to go. You're going to go by yourself. He's like, oh, man. Oh, gosh. Yeah. What is it? And I'm like, well, we're going to explore. We're going to talk about how to be in a space together. And, it's an introduction to erotic power play. He's like, what are they going to do there? I said, I don't know completely. We're just going to trust. We're going to go. And, we have our voices. We know we are very well able to express what our needs and wants are. And, we are in full capacity to say no to what we don't feel comfortable with. And, I feel really comfortable with doing that with you. We've done these types of things before. He's followed me around the world, actually, going to all sorts of strange and fun things. And he's like, okay, I'll think about it. Well, okay. So yes, every time I say that I'll do one of these things with you, I come away with all sorts of interesting experiences and ideas, and it's usually good. So yes, I'll do it.
And what an interesting strategy for you that I'm sure our listeners can perhaps take in as a lesson for how you manage relationships, is that you don't say to somebody, do you want to go to something? You just say, I'm going to this. Would you like to join me? Because then they're not put on the spot. They don't have to come up with some kind of excuse. But the fact that you're going by yourself leaves them feeling, hey, wait a minute, I don't want to be left out.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's a really clever strategy in relationships.
Well, and I also said another option would be for us to just go down to that area, and then you don't have to go to the workshop. I can go to the workshop, and then we'll still have a weekend together because it's, over at a certain time in the evening. And then we can, you can talk to me about what happened, and I'll share with you. But I don't need to just leave you for the weekend. I'm happy to share it with you, however that looks. But he's like, no, I'll go with. So
yeah, really, for sure. It's such a great strategy. And ultimately, if your person is not interested, then they're let off the hook. There's no pressure created there because, when we present things in certain ways to our partners or whomever we're in a relationship with, it's all about how you present it that, lends itself to whether or not they're going to be receptive to it. And, people get triggered by all different kinds of things, and they can feel like they're being, their back is pushed up against the wall, or they can be excited about going and doing it. It really depends on who the person is. So I love that strategy. That's going to be the biggest, well, maybe not the biggest, that's going to be a great takeaway from our conversation today. This is how you manage your partner when you want them to go do something with you.
Yeah. And you have to be okay with their no, though.
Yeah,
because,
of course.
I'm all about being an authentic yes. And the other thing I've noticed lately, Arlene, that's really been an interesting learning for me is that even when I'm an authentic yes, and I speak my truth that yes, this is what I want, sometimes I am surprised by how I react. So if you're in a situation where your partner comes forward with an authentic yes and says, I want to do this, and you enroll them, so to speak, in an activity that perhaps you were more enthusiastic about than they were, it's not always true that you'll be able to predict your feelings or your partner's feelings. So just be aware that this is a fluid situation, being human. And we can't necessarily fast forward the movie and say, oh, that's going to be very triggering when I get to that situation. I'm not going to like that. I'm not going to feel comfortable. I'm going to wish I didn't do that. Or maybe part of me will wish I didn't do that. Because when we are showing up with our authentic yes in the moment, we need to then just trust that whatever is going to evolve out of that is the next step for us to learn from. And it may or may not be comfortable, that step. It may actually be very difficult if we run into something where we feel really, vulnerable or hurt or sad or frightened or jealous or guilty or some other uncomfortable human feeling. But that's still part of our walk, is then now being in that space, which we may or may not have wanted to be in. But that's still the human space that we're in next, right?
And what's so great about that, I love what you just said, because when you're in that moment with someone and you are at an authentic yes, and then you're met by your partner with whatever the response is, if you get triggered, because we never know where our triggers are coming from, and we cannot stop the immediate reaction that we have to those triggers. And if we are mindful in that moment of being triggered, that's actually a growth opportunity where we can talk to our partners about, oh, hey, I just felt a little uncomfortable about that, or, ooh, where did that come from? And to create or provide an opportunity where you can actually have a conversation about it. Because, when we get triggered, we start behaving in ways that are inconsistent with who we are when we are in what's called the window of tolerance, when we're not triggered, we're just being our normal selves, and then we turn into these lunatics when we're out of our window of tolerance. Having that opportunity where you can just share with your partner, oh, this is what just happened for me, and have a conversation. Both people have an opportunity to explore that and learn from it, and it makes the relationship that much stronger, because everyone then knows what's going on in a moment when someone's triggered.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's beautifully put. And the other thing about that is that when we are entering into something that is unusual for us, or we anticipate that it may be that we don't have as much ability to predict. It feels like a great opportunity, and we're an authentic yes, but we know that we haven't been down this road before. I think it's really important to pre-position the communication strategy that we're going to have. Because one of the things I've noticed with clients is they may get into a situation where, yes, it's an authentic yes, they're exploring something new, and the assumption is that the communication will be as effortless as it is in their normal daily life. But when they get there, and now, let's say the woman is feeling triggered, and she doesn't know how to ask for a safe space for communication. So she doesn't know, there's not been an agreement about like how to put a stop there. Like, okay, we need to insert a prolonged pause. We need to, like, let's say it's somebody who's, doing something that's outside of the couple's comfort zone or typical comfort zone. I coach a lot of couples who are kind of entering into polyamorous situations or relationships. And there may be a need for a hard stop within the other person's activities. Let's say her husband has gone off and is with another woman, and she's like, okay, this is already, I'm freaking out. I need this hard stop. I need you to remove yourself from that situation, and we need to create a space for us to communicate. That agreement is really important to include on the front end, so that both people are held, and that ability to communicate in safety and to create spaciousness there, that is pre-positioned, almost like, I don't know if you run. You look like a runner.
I'm a rower.
Oh, you're a rower. Okay, good. So if you're a marathoner, there are those aid stations. And I feel like we should almost put those aid stations into our relationship, even when we're not expanding, even in the everyday, so that we have the aid station where, okay, this is a place where we could stop and where we could think through this. And we know that we'll need nourishment, we'll need hydration, we'll need connection, we'll need what you would get at an aid station. We'll need to say, is it time to quit? Is this where we get into the wagon and go back to the hotel and say, we're going to do it another time, or maybe I'm not a marathoner, whatever it is. But I think that that's really important, that we know that when we make these plans, even if they're just our regular life, that something that it's stretched us a little bit, that we plan also to take care of ourselves and each other, so that we don't just get totally pulled off the shelf.
Oh my gosh. Another gigantic nugget right there for people, the aid stations in your relationship. That's magnificent. I want to explore this further with you, but let me ask you, as is always customary in my show, is Can you take me back in time to a moment when you experienced something? It could be related to the work that you're doing, and maybe is, or something else, but can you walk me back in time to a moment when you experienced something that changed the entire trajectory of your life such that you ended up where you are today?
You bet. So I just love that question, Arlene. And I think it's so important for us to realize that we have these moments, kind of crossroads in our lives where we do make decisions. And there are a couple of situations that I think about. And one is where I choked on a lemon drop and while I was driving a vehicle, and someone saved my life on, a stranger at the side of the road. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I really want to talk about is what happened after that. That moment led me to the feeling that what I was doing at that time really was really not my passion. I had a job that I didn't feel passionate about. And so I went on to kind of an entrepreneurial journey, but it was better for me, but it didn't really include all of who I was. Mm-hmm. When I discovered what I was really meant to do in this life, I wasn't actually a very sexually, I was a sexual person. I had always been a very sexual person in my relationship, but I guess when I say always, that's not correct. I had initially been a very sexual person in my relationship. We'd had a super smoking hot relationship that included, like trysts in the hospital conference room. We were young. But anyway, but we then had a big family, and I became a super mom, super involved with my kids, wore matching clothes with theirs, spent all my time making Halloween costumes and being really connected to other mothers. I was living in the Midwest at the time. I was all about, all the things that mothers did to kind of impress each other and feel like they were making a difference in the world. And like things like Girl Scouts and soccer and things like that. And I still had a good relationship with Jim. We talked a lot, but I was less and less sexual as a human. I was not really connected to my eroticism. I was also perimenopausal, so I was coming up to my menopause, which is a natural kind of a waning time for women in their libido. And my libido was naturally waning, and because I wasn't using my own erotic capacity to continue buoying my libido, which is what we all have. We do not need to use hormones to buoy our libido, but if you don't attend to it, it will not on its own kind of keep itself risen up to the top of your consciousness. Mm-hmm. And so all this is going on. Meanwhile, my husband is similar age, he's all, kind of in a midlife kind of time and working really hard, taking care of the family. And he ends up having an emotional affair with somebody he knows. Mm-hmm. And, in retrospect, it wasn't actually a very big deal. Mm-hmm. I think he kissed her once. I think they texted a little bit. They had some phone calls. Mm-hmm. I was blown away by that. Now, when I think about it now, I think, wow, I was really off the hook for that. Mm-hmm. I really was. I mean, I thought I was going to die. I mean, it was so shocking. I felt so blown away by the whole thing that he would ever have any feelings for anybody else or have any sexy flirtation or, God forbid, kiss another woman. It was really hard for me. So that moment, that time, made me realize that I had left behind this huge part of myself. Mm-hmm. And that it was, it had damaged me. And, at the same time, it had kind of damaged our relationship, but really more, it had damaged me because I had become very 2D instead of 3D as a person.
Mm-hmm. And let me ask you about that. Were the two of you having any conversation at that time about the fact that the amount of sex that you were having was probably significantly diminished from what had taken place historically?
Well, I gotta say, it wasn't that we weren't having sex. It was more my connection to myself sexually. Mm-hmm. And whether my sense of like really putting myself out there. We were having sex. I mean, I know I have clients, many clients that have no sex at all for months and years on end.
Right.
That wasn't us. So, and I want to say this is I guess a bit of a cautionary tale to those of our listeners who are sexual, do have a sex life that they feel is pretty good, even good. That's not it. If you're not really putting your energy into truly connecting with each other and expanding your sex life and expanding yourself into deeper parts of your own erotic life, that's what happened in my situation. It wasn't like, okay, we haven't had sex, we were like on a once a month basis, or we're on a once a week basis. That wasn't it. We had a pretty active sex life. In fact, technically we had an active sex life if you put us on like a chart.
Sure.
But it was more like, what were my priorities and how was I being? So when he'd call me during the day, I was oftentimes kind of irritated, like, hello. He'd call, hello. Hey baby, what you doing? Oh, I'm trying to get the stuff together. We got soccer tonight. We've got, I'm not sure if I can get the cookies over there to that snack thing I'm supposed to take for brownies, and I'll meet you. I don't know. Do you want pizza? That kind of thing. And click, then I'd hang up. Then he'd turn to a friend and she was like, things hard at home, And, like, who's going to be like, what kind of a guy wouldn't find it attractive if somebody else who's like, you're so hot and you're this and that. And here your wife is like, and can you pick up hot dogs? Because we're supposed to grill,
Yeah.
And then, yes, we're doing it, but it's not the same. You follow me? It's not the same because you're not nurturing the whole thing, that erotic connection, that like, sexting, or, I don't know, right now I've got this app called Confide on my phone, which I highly recommend. And you can send sexy texts to your partner that disappear as you touch them with your finger. It's kind of like Snapchat for grownups.
That's magnificent.
Yeah. I mean, and things that you can, and it's a different sense of willingness and openness and curiosity.
Nice. That's beautiful. And what you just described about how your husband would text you or call you, and your response to him was not acknowledging him as an important emotional part of your life, but rather just this partner in life who's about grilling hot dogs and kids and all this other kind of stuff. That's, it's kind of like with dogs. If you don't put the scent out, the dog's not coming.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that happens very, very often with women, especially mothers, because the level of responsibility and care that is required by children, especially younger children, but even as children age on into their teens and late teens, the demands associated with them are so great and, weigh most heavily on the mother that I know many women, they talk about, forget it. I just can't even be thinking about sex. I have too much stuff I have to do. And then they're laying in bed thinking about the list of things they have to do for the next day. And all of that is fine and well. But the problem is that when there is a partner involved, how do you stay connected to that person where you're actually letting them know that you're still interested in them? Because I don't care how strong and confident a person is. If you're in a relationship with someone and not getting any feedback from your partner about, how you're doing or how things are between you, or, making the time to have time together outside of all of the other confines of your life, what would you expect them to do? Do you know what I mean? And
totally.
Do you find that this is a very common story among people that come and see you?
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I do what I do. Because, it wasn't my fault and it wasn't his fault.
Right.
And it wasn't actually this other woman's fault who found him attractive.
Right.
It was fun for them to flirt, and it made their life more interesting. And I, I was doing my job. I was doing what I was supposed to do at my house with my family. And, but I had forgotten that part.
Right. And why do you think that's the part that was forgotten? I mean, what is it about everyday life for people, especially for women when children are involved, that it feels so overwhelming and unmanageable that there's no way to get out in front of it so that you can still maintain your sense of self and your sexual self in the context of this life that you have. What is that?
Really, I feel that it's cultural. I feel that we women and men and women have been lied to about sex by Hollywood, the media, our religious upbringing or not. Even if we haven't been raised in a religious organization, we've still been influenced by the religious nature of the culture. Also, past partners, our families, all these things have given us a message about what it means to be a sexual person. And it's really diminished the importance of sexuality in our daily lives. At the same time, it has exaggerated the importance of sexuality in Hollywood movies and made it seem so easy and also so difficult. It's like we have a no-win rather than a win-win solution out there that we can see when we look around us. And it becomes like almost like, well, I can't be, I don't know who's a really hot woman right now on, who's somebody out there. Well, I used to say Angelina Jolie. She's kind of fallen out of favor. But let's say somebody who we consider super hot. I can't be her. So with this, body at this point in my life, I'm not that sexy anymore.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And because we expect ourselves to be perfect, we expect our partner to read our mind.
Classic for women.
Right. And a lot of the people I work with are in heterosexual relationships, not all, but for people who are dealing with someone from the opposite sex, we expect that person to hold their erotic energy in the same place that we hold it. And that is simply not true. So let me tell you a little something important, Arlene. Men hold their erotic energy in the core. So chest, abdomen, and groin. That's where men hold their erotic energy, which is why when you look at a chart that shows the supply and demand of what we refer to as dick pics in my field, so men send pictures of their genitals to women at a very high level, and the supply is 100 and the demand is 0 because men, this is where their erotic energy is held, is in the core. So they're like, hey, I'm sure you want to take a look at this because, this is what I think is cool. Whereas we women hold our erotic energy in the periphery. It lives there in our hands, in our feet, in our hair, in our head, and the face, neck. If you think about a woman's sensuality and you think about, like, when I speak in front of groups, I'll have people just touch their hands very gently. Do this now with me if you're listening, and just touch your hands. If you're a woman, now if you're a guy, you're going to be like, what? But and then just drag your hand up over your wrist, up towards your elbow. It's like heaven. Guys are like, I don't get it. But that is the thing, is that we're like, and we don't, the other person doesn't understand that when a guy comes to his woman and he grabs her in the core, like the breast or the groin, she looks at him like he's a nutcase. And what she would really like is a foot massage or a very gentle hand massage, or kiss her neck or head rub. These things are fantastic for women, or something that starts to allow women to warm up from the outside in. Once we're warmed up, we are hard to stop. Right. But men are from the inside out. So when we're dealing with men, if we're in a heterosexual relationship, we want to bring our hands on the core and out to the periphery. So we stroke from the center out to the periphery, and that allows the man to fully express his eroticism and not just stay centrally located. But we're talking to each other and we don't understand each other and we don't have vocabulary, and that's why we end up in these problems, because for many of us, sex isn't actually worth it. It's not worth wasting sleep time over because it's not good.
Right.
That's the problem. It's bad. It's like crappy sex. I'd rather take a nap.
That's so funny. And
bad sex is not fun.
Yeah. No, there is no excuse for bad sex. It's like there's no excuse for bad wine.
Well, people say that men will say, that bad sex equals no sex, that there is no sex that's bad if you're having sex, that the only bad sex is no sex. And women will completely disagree with that.
Yeah.
There are so many situations that would be called bad sex. In fact, there's a study out there right now that says that women define good sex, and this is really terrible, but I just find it hard to even say it, but women find good sex to be sex that doesn't hurt. Now, that's just hideous to me.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about hurting in a good way. I'm talking about actually physically painful sex that's, non-erotic painful sex. Yeah. So really, really sad. So there's so much out there of people who are struggling, and that's part of what happens is, well, people just don't know how to get the sex they actually want.
Absolutely. And, to your point about this, especially for women, when you talk about how, women hold their erotic energy in the periphery, whereas men hold it in their core, in women's cores, that's the area where women are most physically vulnerable and in many cases have experienced the most trauma. Yep. And men do not actually understand that while there can be this joke around, you're entering the danger zone by going there. As a man, you don't actually, men are not understanding that they are actually going into a place that holds many deep, dark, very bad secrets for women. And to just go plowing in there without any recognition that this truth and reality exists, even if the woman is not aware that there has been a past trauma, her body remembers it. So it's not surprising to me what you're saying about how women are equating good sex with sex that is not physically painful to them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, sex is really, really loaded, especially the extent to which trauma exists very heavily for women. And if men do not understand this, you're in for a shit show in that department for so many reasons. But I think primarily when you're dealing with trauma, it's very, very difficult for women to move into a different place because your vulnerability is there. How do you trust someone, even if you love them? You're in a place of having been violated, and how do you ever come to a place with a partner where you can truly trust them and really be free and let go? And with that being the case for many women, how do you address that with your clients when you know that trauma has been present, or you suspect that there has been some event in the woman's life, or even for the man, because it sometimes has happened for men, but for women primarily, how do you address that in what is going on between the couple?
Yeah, that's such an important piece. And, it depends, Arlene, on how I'm working with someone. If I'm working in person with someone, then we'll have a different type of interaction. I don't do the deep traumatic or deep healing from trauma that some of my colleagues do. And I will make a referral or work collaboratively with someone who's doing that deep work or the traumatic healing work. So we may be working in parallel, where I'm helping someone kind of progress along some sexual experiences with her partner at the same. And of course, I think it goes without saying, I guess I will say it anyway, that I don't work in person sexually with people. I'm talking to this person, and then she's with her partner, and they're going through exercises at home together, and then we're talking about it again. And then there may be someone else who's doing healing work for her as a triad. So then I would be collaborating with that therapist or other person who does the deep healing traumatic work. Or, but when someone is just buying one of my products that's done virtually, then what I do is to encourage them to stop the program and to go get that healing work done. Because it's really important that we recognize, our own histories. And it's, in my view, even more important that we do not allow people who've mistreated us to rob us of our sexual birthright. They've already done enough damage in our lives.
Yeah.
If we allow them to steal from us the whole rest of our sexual pleasure experience, that's really on us now. And
Absolutely.
we have the right and the responsibility, in my opinion, to do whatever it takes to get that cleared to the best of our ability, to make ourselves as whole as we possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's unfortunate is that because there are so many things that go on in life that give us a reason to say that we're not interested in sex, or that we don't really feel we can talk about it and so forth because I'm just too busy, or the kids this or that or whatever, it's really easy and convenient for people to absent themselves from their sexual life as a way of not having to deal with the reality of what's gone on for them.
Yeah. And you know what? That's such a great point, because here's the thing. Sex is so powerful, and we have access to parts of ourselves that we just don't even know exist. And we're carrying them around as this giant iceberg of vulnerability and pain that is down there. And it's a perfect vehicle for personal growth, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
We opt out of all that growth.
Yeah, no kidding. And the thing is, going to the whole idea of, at the end of the day, and there you are with your partner, and then, one of the partners is sitting in front of the TV kind of having checked out, and the other one is busy cleaning up the kitchen or picking up the toys or all this kind of stuff. The thing that I've never understood, and maybe you can help me understand this, is why would you not, knowing the kind of connection that you have with a person, why would you not have this be the thing that you are most looking forward to at the end of your day? Because it allows you to access the adult part of yourself, the fully realized physical and sexual part of yourself, where this is a place that you get to go where you have the relief and the release and the joy and the celebration and the experience with this other person that you've chosen to go through life with. I mean, why would you not just be counting the minutes until you had the opportunity to connect in that way with that person in that place? I just don't get it.
Well, I think the way you describe that is ideal, because what you're saying is, why wouldn't you look forward to having a joyous sexual connection with another person? And of course you would, but that's not what people have.
Yeah.
So what they have
Great point.
They're looking forward to the actual, the shadow of that, or the echo of that, or something that is the antimatter of that. It's got all the power of that positive, fantastic connection. All that power is there, but it's in the negative. It's actually the same degree of impact, but it's all negative. You feel isolated, rejected. You feel pain instead of pleasure. You feel you feel less acknowledgement. You feel less beautiful. You feel more embarrassed. You feel angry. You feel hostile and resentful. I mean, there's so many reasons not to do it. Why would you do it? And maybe there's specific sexual dysfunction. You have, very specific things that are not happening or are happening poorly, or your partner has no clue how to please you and is very selfish in the way that he or she interacts with you and only using you for his or her own purposes.
Right.
And you end up rolling over and feeling not only hurt physically, possibly, but just like absolute crap as a person. And you end up, you wake up in the morning and you're like, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah.
And that happens so often. And then people just stop. And sometimes it's not to say that sometimes what happens is well-meaning people love each other and something goes wrong sexually. And they just don't have the vocabulary or the confidence to talk about it. And now it's awkward. So the next day you get up in the morning, it's like, let's say it's a heterosexual couple. They're having sex. Everything's great. He loses his erection. He feels inadequate.
Yeah. She
She doesn't know what to say about it. So she's like, oh, well, I don't want to make him feel bad. So she's not going to say anything. So there's no conversation.
Right.
Okay. So now the next day they're having coffee and she's thinking, maybe we could try it again. But he's thinking, I don't want to do that again. That was embarrassing.
Right.
And then she wants to say, hey, what happened? And then he feels like she's shaming him, or, or she doesn't have an orgasm. It's a different situation. And he feels like, she has to have an orgasm in order for him to feel like he can have an orgasm. This is very typical. Like you kind of get this like checklist. She comes, then I can come. So then she feels like, I'd just like to be done now. I really don't want to have an orgasm right now, but he won't stop until she's come. So now she pretends to come. Oh, that's like, what's that? When Harry Met Sally, she has a fake orgasm. Fantastic.
Just to get
like we should all have that crescendoing sound and be orgasm. It's like the Hollywood style. That's not the way all women sound, by the way. Just but and she has a porn or a Harry Met Sally kind of fake orgasm. Now he's like, wow, that was great. Let's do that again. Well, now she's in deep trouble. He's doing it again, and she's like, it's like a dog that you end up, he cries and whines, and you finally give him the treat. Now you've trained that dog, and it's the same thing in the relationship. So now she's like, I don't want to tell you, but last time, that great orgasm was fake. She feels really inadequate. And so does he. And, it just, they're down. And then like, how do you resolve that? That's the problem, is you get too many of those things happening together, and all of a sudden you're in a big mess, and it's like, forget it. I'm going to stay up and be on Facebook or watch Netflix and hopefully we'll ignore it. Maybe he'll drink a little bit too much. I'll go to bed. He won't even notice.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So
that's what happened.
How is it when, obviously a couple who comes to see you to some extent is invested in trying to resolve the issues they have in their relationship around sex. So at least there is a motivation to do something about it. But when you've got a couple, as is the case with many couples, where they are at opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to what's going on between them with sex, and it usually the stereotype is that, one of them wants more sex than the other, or one of them is more interested in the other than the other, and they're not talking about it in this whole thing. And it's a whole shit show going on.
Yeah.
And there they are sitting in front of you, and they are so far away from one another physically, and in every other way. They're not connected to one another. They're really far gone. They're so far gone, they may not make it. How on earth do you take a couple like that and turn them around? Because I know that there are people listening to this that are nodding their head at various stages of what we're talking about. And I'm sure that's happened to you everywhere you've spoken, as a public speaker about this stuff, that they actually do not believe it's possible to salvage that part of their relationship. What do you do with a couple like that?
Well, I have two ways that I work with people right now. Now, I don't know when people will be listening to this podcast. It could be that my modalities have changed when you hear this. So, but for right now, I have two ways I work with people. And if I'm working with a couple, I only do it one way, and that is through a VIP day. So I have a full day with a couple. And I do that because it's such intense stuff that I want to stay there, and it's about 6 hours that we spend together during a day. There's a lunch break. It's a significant investment of my time and their time, and it's a financial investment in the relationship. I love doing this work. And we spend that day really determining, intent, really talking about the past history, but also understanding, I think I've told you that, perhaps in my book, you've seen that I have developed a model called the bedroom model, which creates a recipe for people to be able to co-create this relationship. So we talk about that, and there's an assessment that people have done before they get there, and pre-work and so forth. And so then we talk about how to use the same skills and abilities that they use in the other parts of their lives to start to build this bridge. And, frankly, it sounds really challenging. It is if there's no help, but people make huge progress because if they have the intent to be together and they want that, and they get some help from me to, and this language, this vocabulary, and a way to kind of be like, oh, I see you have a different environmental signature, erotic signature than I do. You want to have sex outside, but I'm actually, a private person. So let's do it in the minivan in the garage. And they're like, okay.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a nice, some kind of a compromise, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I work with couples. But the way I really like to work is really with women. And it's done in a pod group program that is done over a 6-month period where 4 to 6 women meet virtually, and we go through this process and we develop together our own voices around authentic expression. And then the women take this work back to their relationship. There's also some material for men called Melt Her that helps men understand women better. And they learn that from me as well. So there's this like dovetailing of 2 people who learn the same types of things and how to express themselves with each other without blowing the relationship up, because that can easily happen. If you get started on this conversation, you don't have support. I can't tell you how often people would just break up because it's too much to hold. It's like you get insulted sexually and it's like, forget it.
Yeah.
Your mother's weird too, or whatever,
Yeah, exactly.
You're just like your mother, you're cold, whatever. And I that's how I work. So it's not a traditional therapeutic model. It's either done intensively in a one day or it's done virtually in a group. And the cool thing about the group, Arlene, is that when we are in a group, we realize that we are not alone, that this is more of a societal and cultural thing, and that it's not as hard as it looks. Yeah. And that we're all different. Everybody has a different orgasmic response and a different way of thinking about desire, a different way that their mind works around sex. So people share to the extent they're interested about these things, but that we go through a 5-step proven process that allows them to really create today a beautiful relationship and then continue to co-create that in a realignment over time. Because as we know, sex is something that it's not a stagnant in our relationship. It is a constantly evolving process, and it's a potential for huge growth. And as we age, we're having sex with older, and our earth suit is aging, so it has different factors in it, right? We have like, okay, now I have people come to me with arthritis. Like, how do I do this with arthritis? Hashtag get sex furniture. There's furniture. There's pieces that you can buy that help you position yourself with just anyway, Google it. But not just furniture, but bolsters, pillows, different things like that you can use to help you have a better relationship, even with changing body issues or just for fun. Right. So, but that's how I work with people, and frankly, it's just an absolute joy. And it's a lot less difficult than you'd think, because once people get in the door or get into the relationship with me, that's like 98% of the job.
Oh, absolutely. Because here's the thing. They obviously are looking for help. And if they can just find somebody that they can trust enough to provide them with that help, I would imagine that they're completely on board. They're excited. They're anxious to get moving because they feel that someone actually can help them. And up until that moment, the desperation that hits all of us when we feel we're confronted with something that we just simply don't know how to solve, you feel hopeless as a result, because what else is there to do? Because you really don't know, and you wouldn't even know who to talk to about it. So it's magnificent that you do what you do.
It's super fun. Here's the other thing. We have been taught that sex is either super, super easy because it's natural, right? I love the word natural.
That's the biggest snow job in the history of ever.
Right. It's natural. So, and if it's not, in quotes, natural and super easy, then we are somehow dysfunctional, right? If it's not natural and easy, then there's something wrong with us. So making an investment to improve your sex life is a tough thing, because first of all, you have to say, I need to do something about this. It's maybe natural, but it's not working for me. And number 2, I have to decide that this will change my life if I do this. It's not just going to be I have better sex. It's going to be I have a better life. And I got to say, you will. because I've seen this over and over again. When you get this out of the way, this like huge iceberg we were talking about, it frees up so much energy. You just lift off the ground in terms of the way you move around. And all of a sudden you are attractive, not just to your spouse, but to your clients, to everybody else, because you are a sexually fluid person who is receiving pleasure, giving pleasure. You have more humor in your life. All sorts of other problems just melt away. Because this is another secret. We create problems in our lives that help us justify the fact that we don't have sex.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So there's a lot of stuff once you cover the sex thing that those things just disappear. Like the person who lives at your house, who wanted to a place for a couple weeks, but ended up staying, never pays rent. But the fact that that person lives there means that you don't have to talk about your sex problem with your partner. And now that person leaves, and you can remodel your house a little bit because you can change. You get some kind of an ability to look at your house differently, and all of a sudden there's money there. There's so many things that have happened to clients where all of a sudden their creativity, all these other pieces, just like all of a sudden they resolve. So that's not what I sell. It's like, oh, you're going to be able to have increased creativity. You're going to have your finances are going to be better. You're going to get better clients. Your art will become more expressive. I don't sell that, but maybe I should, because those are the outcomes that people experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anyway. and there's no limit to the kind of outcomes that they can have when people are feeling freer in their bodies and emotionally. I mean, how could you not feel that you feel hopeful, you feel optimistic, you feel like the sky's the limit, because the weight of this has been lifted off of you, and now you're free to just go out and experience the world, experience your life, and not be stressing about everything that's going on in your life. And I really love what you just said, another big value bomb, which is that we create problems in our life that justify why we're not doing things. And I think that's not just about sex. I think that's about pretty much everything that we do in life. That's why, entrepreneurs have such a hard time moving forward in what they're doing, because they're creating problems that are actually justifying why they are not moving forward. It's like being a perfectionist. It's like, oh, well, you can't finish this because it's not perfect, which means you're totally avoiding the fact that you're afraid, and you're afraid of people are going to judge you and all the things that come. And you just, chalk it up to that. Well, I'm a perfectionist. It's like, what are you doing? I mean, why would you not be a perfectionist? You're going to work to be an imperfectionist? What's wrong with you? What the hell, man?
Exactly. It's so true. And it's just fascinating how it then becomes this thing that is a weight in your relationship. And I can't tell you how often then people start taking their energy and moving it someplace else. And that becomes really sad, because that energy is no longer available for you. And there's another energy that happens, and that is called guilt. So you aren't dealing with your current relationship problem. Maybe you're getting some sexual energy off of somebody outside of your relationship. Now you are burdened with guilt on top of the rest of it. So that's not helpful. Right. Because you want to be accepted, erotically accepted. That's a normal experience. We want that. It's normal to want that.
And the last thing you want, or should be wanting, in my opinion, and of course this is a judgment, what you do is entirely up to you, but you really don't want to be in a situation where your receptors are activated, which then makes you susceptible to someone else. Because it's one thing to engage in a relationship, an emotional or physical or sexual one, with someone else if you're in a relationship with someone already, and there's been a negotiation or discussion around that, okay, we would like to, engage with other people. But it's an entirely different thing when you are actually allowing yourself to be open to that, when that's not actually where you want to be. It's an emotional reaction. It's the sense of rejection that you're feeling that makes you turn away from where you are and look somewhere else, instead of staying in there and fighting for what it is that you want with that person that you're with, that you love, that you want to spend your life with, that this is the thing. They are your person, But this sense of, well, there's nothing that can be done here, and now I'm just going to turn in another direction, and I'll be a victim and be all dejected and stuff. And then I'm open to having someone come along and just say, oh, you're so hot looking. You're like, oh yeah, wow, that's really great. I like you too. Now let's go have sex.
Yep. And now there you go. Now that power has shifted. It's now in this totally different space for you.
Yeah. Yeah,
right? It's in a different place. How do you deal with that now? That's just really, really tough, right?
Yeah. And then you just further complicate the whole thing, which it never had to be that way. And I don't think people are inclined to want to go do that. But, in many cases, I believe that it's just easier to have things be a cop-out, to just cop out on things and not do the work necessary, and not try to have the thing that you most want. And one of the things that I notice, and maybe you have a thought about this, is that we strive for excellence in every area of our life except our relationships.
Yep.
And what the hell is that? How does that even work?
I know.
The one place that you would think, the one place that gives us the most, that sustains us, that carries us through life, is the one thing that we spend no time on.
Yeah. And, I got it. Just getting back to the story you asked me about earlier, when I realized that, Jim had sexy thoughts about another woman and I was devastated, I took a look at myself, the way I dressed, the way I took care of myself equals not. I didn't have time for that, to work out. I didn't have time, really. And as a result, I felt, not that you have to work out in quotes to feel good about yourself, but it was an indication it was a reflection of the fact that I didn't pay attention to my body. Yeah. I was not embodied. And then I looked around me and I thought, how is my mental life reflecting my relationship? And I looked at my library, my bookshelf. I was a big book collector at that time. And I had so many books about child development, how to make a great Halloween costume, how to talk to kids about sex, a lot of that, more things about books to read to children, tons and tons of books of fairy tales, books for young adults. I prided myself on my library for children and about children. There was not anything in that whole library. It was my own personal library of books, nothing to do with relationship, nothing to do with love, nothing to do with sex.
Yeah.
0. I never spent an instant thinking about it. And part of it was my arrogance. I really felt like I had it, like we had it. But it was like you move into a house with gorgeous perennials and you're like, actually, I did this recently, moved into a house with gorgeous perennials. And it's like, I have a gorgeous garden. That is true. I do have that. And I have it right this second. But it's there and I am enjoying it. If I don't keep cultivating it and keep weeding it and keep giving it what it needs and doing all the things that you need to do, or having somebody help me do that, which is what I'm doing now, it's not going to always be a gorgeous perennial garden. Right. I was remembering with arrogance how hot our relationship had been. And I just didn't put it as a high priority. And when I realized that I'd actually just ignored it and allowed it to go fallow, really, even though we continued to have sex, like my garden would continue to have flowers, it wasn't at the level that it could have been.
Right.
And, it was a real loss, and I almost destroyed the whole thing because it was fortunate for me that they didn't actually have what we would call sex, but even if they had, I think that I'm not sure it would have affected me any more than how it did affect me, because I just realized that the sexual energy that he was sharing with her was something that I wasn't really exchanging with him. Yeah. We had sex, but we didn't share the sexiness, It was a different thing. It was more transactional and more like check that box kind of thing. Like, okay, good, did that. No, we're sexual,
Yeah.
But it's not a one-time thing. It is a 24-hour day thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For men as well as women.
Wow. Dr. J, this has been so magnificent. And I'm sure our listeners are just, their heads are spinning right now because, most people don't talk about this stuff. And, of course, I have about 10 1,000 other questions. And I wonder if, given that we're just about out of time here, I'm wondering whether or not you'd be open to coming back and having another conversation with me.
Oh, I'd love to talk to you about this again.
Several other things that I'd really like to explore with you that I think would be really, really beneficial to our listeners. And in the meantime, I'm sure you're going to have plenty of interest from people listening to this. Can you share with our listeners where they can find you if they'd like to know more about you, or
of course,
take advantage of the things you have to offer?
Sure. I am available on the interwebs at www.janeguyn, that's spelled G-U-Y as in yes, Guyn.com. So www.janeguyn.com.
Brilliant.
And there's a gift there / feel like your sexy self that you can get online there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's brilliant. And I'll make sure that we've got your contact information in the show notes. And I just want to thank you so much. This has been the most magnificent hour. And it's been so delightful and such a wonderful conversation, and something that's quite unexpected for my shows, which is all the more of a treat for me because I am the resident provocateur. And anytime I have an opportunity to share with people things that they might be a little tight-lipped about, all the better for me.
It was a total treat. I loved it.
Oh, that's
Ask
beautiful.
me back anytime. I'll be there.
I sure will. I would love to have you do that, and I'll follow up with you. So
You bet.
Anyways, Dr. Jane, thank you so very much for being with
My
me
pleasure.
today. Beautiful.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
And there you go, everybody. What a magnificent episode today. And as is always the case, when we wrap it up on What's Your Next Move, I ask you to think about where you're at in your life and the kind of things that you're dealing with, and ask yourself, what's your next move? I'm Arlene Battisil. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll be back with another episode. Welcome to What's Your Next Move, the podcast for peak performers who are making things happen but are running into roadblocks that prevent them from getting what they want. Whether you work for someone else, you're an entrepreneur, thinking about starting your own business, or at a point in your life where you just can't make the move from where you are to where you want to go, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about answering one question: what's your next move? And helping you harness your power so your next move is the one that changes your life. I'm your host and resident provocateur, Arlene Battisil, and I want to know, what's your next move?